Police officers of Reddit, what's the oddest place you've encountered people you formally arrested? I'm not a cop, but years ago I got arrested for drunk in public, not a proud moment. At the cop shop I was honest, and told them I'd also done some blow. The arresting officer spent like an hour lecturing me about drug abuse and alcohol abuse, and how destructive it is. He wasn't wrong. 2 years later I went to rehab, because I got out of control. First group therapy session, and guess who was sitting in the circle? Bingo, the arresting cop from 2 years ago. We became good friends and still call each other from time to time. I'm not a police officer. 3 years or so ago I used to work at a festival bar. Everyone working at the bar had to wear the same costume. About 2 hours in my shift, the police showed up, looking for one of my colleagues. The guy they came for noticed, started running, and the officers chased him. 10 minutes later, the guy was back to work. He'd just circled around, came back working. He figured they wouldn't be looking for him back at work. He was right. Not a police officer, but I'm a reporter who has worked with police officers and judges over the past several years. I was talking to a judge one time, and he told me a story about how, years and years ago, he threw a guy in jail on some charge. I can't remember what it was. A few months after that, the judge was leaving our local municipal airport, and he looks up to see one of the guys loading bags onto the plane is none other than the guy he threw in jail. He said they got to talking, and the guy wasn't mad at the judge at all. He said what he did was stupid, and he didn't blame the judge for throwing him in jail. The judge told me he saw that guy several more times over the years and they became almost sort of friends. I also know of a local police officer who stopped getting food at a D's because one time, when he was off duty, he went there and recognized the guy making the food as someone he had once arrested. He said that was the last time he ever went there. Story from a friend in Coworker back in my co days. He was at a Mexican restaurant in Los Angeles with his wife and kids when a guy came up and asked him if he was Officer X. My friend anticipated the worst and pushed his son behind him as he turned to the guy. He told the guy yes and asked him why. The guy turned to his friends and said, "Yo, this is Officer X. He treated me really cool last time I was locked up. Definitely could have gone worse." A couple months prior we had a co sent to the hospital after an encounter with a former detainee at a gas station. Wasn't long after that when I decided it wasn't worth the risk to my new family and I changed professions. A police officer friend visited a restaurant with his family. They had at least a dozen people seated, dressed nicely. After a round of drinks, they placed their order with the waitress. Food took a long time to arrive, but just before the food was ready, a dishwasher came out of the kitchen and pulled my cop friend aside. He advised to the officer that the chef had recently received a DUI from this officer and thought the chef was enthusiastically looking forward to the servers bringing out the food so he can get revenge. Needless to say, the officer rounded up his party, paid for the drinks, and they quickly headed elsewhere. To this day, I wonder if the chef simply put his bullsack in the food, or if it was much more dangerous, like poison. We'll never know. When I was addicted to meth I used to get really paranoid out in public, and there was this one cop who would always drive me home, or calm me down. Never arrested me though, and he was always super nice, even though I was always zonked out. I'm guessing it's because I was only ever a danger to myself. Anyway, I got sober and hadn't seen him in months. Went on vacation out of town and saw him and his family in vacation too. We caught up and he told me how much better I looked now that I was off the drugs. This happened many years ago in my grandparents' small farming country town in Australia, which is why everyone knew about it and told all their relatives about it. It's that sort of place. One Sunday the policeman, the town is so small it only has one cop, abruptly got up and walked out of church in the middle of the service. His wife was annoyed at the rudeness. Then at the end of the service the policeman was hanging around the door as people walked out, until a man visiting his elderly parents appeared, upon which he grabbed his elbow and said, "Could I please have a word, sir?" It turned out this man was visiting his parents because he was wanted in the UK for fraud so big he was featured in the new issue of Interpol which had arrived that morning. The policeman had gone home to double check he wasn't recognizing the wrong guy before he arrested him. My dad was in the gang squad for a bit. Arrested a guy fairly high up in one of the local motorcycle gangs. A few years later the whole family is at one of those restaurants where they cook in front of you and they seated the guy he arrested at our table. My dad and this guy give each other a tense greeting and we begin our meal. I turn to the guy, I was 4 years old, and say hi, I'm you/hippocampus too. My daddy is a policeman, and he catches bad guys. What do you do? And he responds I'm a bad guy, and he caught me. My dad is just about in tears, he's laughing so hard. The guy ended up buying my parents a bottle of wine and lobster for the whole table. Cop. Involuntarily committed a guy who was threatening suicide and found by the train tracks. He disputed my decision and brought us to a commitment hearing to get out. Was committed by the judge anyway, based on my testimony. Gave me my birth control prescription at the pharmacy at CVS. How about meeting the officer who arrested you? I recently hit the 60-day mark for AA. A few years back, I was picked up for DUI and the cop took no shit, no excuses. Dropped me in holding. Next morning he showed up, coffee, aspirin, and Powerade. Took the time to talk to me and gave me a card for a guy he knew. Well, last month, when I hit 30 days, the cop showed up. Turned out before becoming a cop, he had been a booze monkey, although he never got in legal trouble. My sponsor, the guy he knew, had been his sponsor. The officer was coming in to tell us his story of how he changed his life and how we could too. Thing is, half of us there had met this cop and been given the number for the local AA chapter. And he remembered each and every one of us. And yes, it took me 2 years to finally admit I had a problem. Boston Market. I arrested this guy after his wife came in and claimed he strangled her the night before. I live about 40 minutes away from the town I work for. About 3 weeks after the arrest, I walked into BM to get dinner for me and my wife. I turn around, and the guy I arrested was a few people behind me in line. We made eye contact. We both knew our food was more important to both of us. He was getting food about 40 minutes from his house, so I guess him and his wife didn't get back together. Not a police officer, but my dad was. When I was around 6 or 7 we were renting a house in a suburb outside of the large city my dad worked for. We had a maintenance guy come out for some repairs to the house. I was following him around while he worked and was in the back of the house with him when my dad comes out of his bedroom. This guy turned white as a ghost and started stammering. My dad tells me to get out of here. There is yelling and a few punches thrown by my dad before he takes this guy down. Turns out he had arrested him a few weeks before, and the guy saw the picture of us my dad kept with him and went into detail about how he was going to slit me and my siblings' throats while my dad watched. It was apparently purely coincidental, but my dad got a restraining order. We had a very aggressive patrol on our street for the next few weeks. Good times. I arrested a guy for shoplifting. Asterisk nothing serious, but he did go to jail because he had prior convictions. About a year later as I was walking up to my front door, I saw a guy sitting on the front step of the house next door that I thought I recognized. He made some shitty joke about me being a one Abe Keanu Reeves, which I laughed off, but it made me wonder if I dealt with him before. The next day I went back through our records, and sure enough, I had arrested him the previous year. So anyways, we started getting rocks thrown through our windows at night. Happened 3 times. My tires got slashed on both of my cars, and my car got keyed. This was all over the course of just a few nights. We called the cops each time but nothing ever really resulted. We didn't know about the car vandalism until the next morning. But when the windows were smashed I ran outside right away, but nobody was around. I was pretty sure it was my new neighbor, but there just wasn't any evidence tying the vandalism to anyone. I put up some obvious cameras and floodlights, and the vandalism stopped. But we were worried for a while that it would escalate, and the guy kept harassing us. He didn't work and spent a lot of the time just smoking on the front step. Whenever anyone from our place walked by, he'd insult them in some way. He called my girlfriend a proud white bitch because she mowed the lawn. Lol. Not a cop, loss prevention officer. In Canada LP can perform actual arrests. I understand that's not the case in most of the USA. Went to a bar to see a band last week. I saw the bassist setting up, and it took me a while to realize why he looked so familiar. I had arrested his son for a robbery 6 years ago. Then when the band started playing I noticed the guitarist. I arrested him for domestic violence a few years back. Great band, I'd go see them again. I'm pretty sure the bassist recognized me. I arrested this dude for multiple stalking charges against a juvenile student of one of the local high schools. This dude was crazy. First arrest, I towed his car for 30 days because he parked illegally and had expired registration, hoping it'd deter him from driving 2 hours to try and talk to this girl. I then arrested him 2 weeks later where he told me he took the train. After several other arrests made by me and other officers, guess where I see this dude? I ordered pizza for my fam and this dude was the delivery boy. Super awesome situation. Not a police officer but a lawyer. I stuck someone in jail for being thousands of dollars behind on his child support. He cursed me and called me everything under the sun. Well, he ponied up the $700 get out of the clink money, and when I pulled into my driveway the next day, there he was, roofing my house. SMH. My dad was a cop for 30 years. 30 years after he arrested this guy as a beat cop, he was at a bar in Florida. This guy kept eyeing him up and down. My dad started talking to him. Found out they were from the same city and that's when the guy was like, holy shit, you're officer poop _drunk stat, you locked me up 30 years ago. As you can imagine, you never know how it's gonna go from there, if the guy's gonna attack or something crazy like that. Ultimately the guy thanked him saying it's what finally got his life on track, and bought him a beer. Not a police officer, but a lawyer. I went to trial on a horrible DUI, 3x the legal limit, found in his car, in the driver's seat, car on, in front of the liquor store. Somehow we won. The next week, I went to that same liquor store and my client was there. He was not supposed to be drinking per court orders.